Greetings, and welcome to the Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. We hope that you enjoy what you're about to see, and you can find us on the corner of Broadway and Church Streets at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. Or you can find us at bgmethodist.org and on Facebook at Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. Alright, so this morning we're taking kind of our first big step into kind of really looking at the Bible and exploring what is there, and we're starting with Genesis, or I should say more correctly, we are starting with the first 11 chapters of Genesis, because, well, those are the stories we tell so often in Sunday school and in Bible school, and those are the stories that we hear so often in the media around us all the time, and so we're going to start there, but because we know so much about it, we're going to start with kind of a little quiz first, and so I'm going to ask you all a bunch of questions, and we're going to look at the answers and see what's there. So the first one is, how many of each animal was Noah told to take? Two, okay. Okay, we'll get to the answers afterwards, and what did Eve eat that she wasn't supposed to? Apple, fruit. Apple, fruit. Don't read ahead. I had to get after Donnie Tucker down in Yoga this morning for that too. All right, so number 3, who came first, Adam or Eve? Adam, okay. How long did creation last? Good. I heard something back there. 7 days, 6 days, 6 days, and a Sabbath day. So total of 7, but 6 actual days of creation. Any other answers? Okay, we'll go with it. How long was Noah and his family on the ark? 40 days and 40 nights, okay. Last question. Where does Satan show up in Adam and Eve's story? Say Cain, okay. I hadn't heard that one yet today. Okay.
How about the snake?
The snake, okay, we got the snake. Or some Bibles will say serpent, so that's good. All right, now let's see how well you all did. So first question, how many animals was Noah told to take? Well, we've got different ideas there. Chapter 6 says male and female, 1 pair of each. Chapter 7 says take 7 pair of clean animals and 1 pair of unclean animals. Later on, though, in chapter 7, we find out what actually gets onto the ark, which is 1 pair of each animal is what actually makes it on there. Should be aware this is how the rest of this quiz is going to go. All right. So there's that one. And then what fruit did? What fruit? I'm giving it away. The general idea is an apple. We are never actually told what kind of fruit it is. Now in your insert for today, it says probably could have been a date or a fig. Probably could have been any sort of fruit, even though we don't know about it. But chances are it was not an apple, actually. That just is kind of what we always think of when we get there. All right, question 3. Who came first, Adam or Eve? Well, again, it depends on where you look. In chapter 1, on the 6th day, God said, towards the end says, God made them male and female, not male and female. And then we get to chapter 2, that's where we get the story that we're used to hearing, which is God made the first Adam, and then made Eve out of Adam's rib. And this brings up one of the first big points when we're looking at Genesis, is that we have 2 different and distinct creation stories. One in chapter 1 and one that starts in verse 3 or 4 of chapter 2. And they are different stories. They're distinct stories, too, about how the world is created. So that's where we're starting. That really kind of points out one of those big differences. Question 4, how many days of creation? Well, same problem. First story says 7 days. That's the one we're all familiar with. The second story is 1 day-ish. We really don't know how long. The second one just said, on the day when God began to create, and it goes on from there. And so we just kind of 1 day-ish in there. All right, the next one. How long were Noah and his family on the ark. He also had 40 days and 40 nights. I'm getting a bunch of shaking heads back there because they're right. In chapter 7, verse 6, Noah is said to be 600 years old when they go on the ark. When they come off of the ark finally, in chapter 8, Noah is 601 years old. Now, I went through probably for the first time, at least in seminary, and I'm not even sure I did it then, I went through and looked at how many days did they do all this stuff. And well, they get on the ark, and they wait 7 days before it starts to rain. So they're already cooped up there on a week before it starts to rain. Then it starts to rain. Then we get to the 40 days and the 40 nights of the rain and the flood waters coming up. And really, that's just the beginning. Because then there are 150 days on top of all the flood waters. And then there are 150 days while the waters begin to come down. And then they come to rest or crash on Mount Ararat. And they're there for about 2.5 months while the waters continue to go down. And then Noah opens a window. He opens a window, sends a bird out, he goes flying around to see if there's something out. The bird comes back without anything. Everything's not dry enough yet, and that lasts 40 days. And then so Noah says, well, okay, if you're back, let's send another one out. Sends another bird out. It takes another 7 days before that one comes back with an olive branch. Then Noah says, hey, this is pretty good. We're making some progress. He sends another one out, and they wait 7 days for it. And he never does actually come back. He just finds a place to land somewhere and begins to build a nest. And so that's the sign. Noah says, all right, well, we're going to open the hatch. They open the hatch to the ark then, and they wait another 2 months with an open hatch before they finally get off the boat. I don't know about y'all, but if I stand out of my front door and I hold the door open, it better be 100 degrees outside, or I'm going to go outside. I'm not going to stand there just staring at everything. But that's what they did. That was, it took them quite a long time for all of that to take place. Now, the last question. Where in the story of Adam and Eve does Satan show up? Tom says it's Cain, the serpent. Well, it's a trick question. Satan doesn't actually show up in the story. That's what we read back into the story, that Satan was there, but we're not actually told that anywhere in Genesis that Satan is there because Satan isn't a thing in Genesis. They have no idea who he is or what he does, anything like that. It just is the snake is the only character in there. Now, this is the thing about Genesis, especially these first 11 chapters of Genesis, is that they are probably the trickiest part of the entire Bible. And it's hard, there's so much stuff that is out there about it, and it gets kind of hard and confusing, and it's the one that gets the most discussion, but also gets so badly abused by so many for what's there. So, when we read through Genesis, there's something we've got to keep in mind, which is this. That there's always, you've all heard it said, there's always 3 ways of looking at things. There's my way, there's your way, and then there's the truth. The same thing holds when we're reading through Genesis. There is the way that we've always read it, or think we have always read it. Then there is the way that it was put together, and then there's the truth of the actual story. Because we try and read it one way from where we are today, and it doesn't really ever work with it. It's hard to reconcile with our world today. And then there's the way that it was originally compiled. And I say compiled because that's how it was. There were lots of stories that were handed down from generation to generation to generation that finally some folks began to put together in a book. Now, there are scholars out there who have spent all their professional lives going back into the Hebrew and doing all of that, and they can identify at least 3, if not 4 different people who had a hand in writing the book of Genesis. And that's why we end up with Noah being told to take 2 different kinds of animals. That's how we end up with 2 different creation stories. And that's how we end up with some of those trickier parts of Genesis that we have, is that, there's lots of folks that had their hand in writing this. And so it makes it a real challenge for us as we go back to read. Here's the thing that we have to do when we're reading through Genesis. And the first and foremost and most important thing is that we don't read it as a history book. It was not written as a history book. It's not meant to be a history book. That when we try and read it as a history book, we at best we are limiting, at least from our perspective, what it is that God can do in the world, because we're really narrowly defining God. At worst, though, we are preventing ourselves from Because we're saying, God, if you're going to show up in the world here, you've got to do it inside of this very narrowly defined place that we're going to give for you. Otherwise, we aren't going to see you because we're trying to so very narrowly read what's there. Genesis isn't a history. But if Genesis isn't a history, then what is it? What is being accomplished in telling these stories? So often when we're presented with Genesis, we're presented with this. We're presented with two sides of this, and we're told, you've got to pick a side. You've got to pick a side on here, and that's it. That's the way you've got to go. And again, there's my way, there's your way, and then there's the truth. And that's where we find ourselves. The thing that we have to remember is that both of those sides only tell a part of the story. And that's where we have to be honest with ourselves in this, is that we're only ever going to be able to tell part of the story, but we can do a better job than we are now. Genesis is fundamentally a story that is being told to different people in a different time to teach them about who God is. And more importantly than that, it's a story that's being told to teach people about their relationship with God. Because we aren't ever going to be able to know everything there is to know about God, but we can know about our relationship with Him. And that's what they're trying to describe and trying to tell us through these stories that have been passed on from generation to generation. And so it starts with the creation story. When God created the world and said, you know what, it's good. And we're a part of that world, and we're good. We're good in it. We are good in that world. But then we're also told in there that we are given dominion over this world, but we aren't just given dominion, but we are dependent on that world also. And that begins to raise some tricky questions for us, and how do we deal with that? Where we are given dominion, but we are just as dependent on it. That's where the CEV Student Bible that I showed you all last week does a great job of kind of fleshing that out and really asking then those really good questions that cause us to pause and reflect for what does that mean for who we are today if we take seriously this idea of dominion and dependence that we're shown just in the creation story. But then we go from there, we get to the time that is traditionally called the fall. And when sin enters into the world, and that's one route we can go down that, but sometimes I think we need to say, how can we tell that story in ways that we can understand it? And I got to thinking, many of you have kids or been around kids or have worked with kids, and do you remember that first time you looked at your son or daughter or grandchild or niece or nephew or friend or whoever it was, and you looked at them, and you could tell they were looking right back at you, that they could see you for that first time, that they were looking right at you and they were happy about that? You know, they didn't care if you were mom or dad or Joe down the street. You were the person that was there holding them up, changing their diaper, feeding them food, helping them, burping them a little bit, playing with them and making all those goofy faces as adults we make to kids. But they looked at you and they saw you for that first time. You could see it in their eyes that you could tell they're staring right at you and they're focused right at you. That's a great time, isn't it? But it's also a bittersweet time because now they know stuff. Now they know that there's a world outside of us, or outside of themselves in there. And that's what we see with Adam and Eve is that, they were in the Garden of Eden, and for that whole time they were in there, they didn't know things. They were there, it was great, it was wonderful, it was idyllic, it was peaceful. God was there with them in the midst of that. They didn't know things, but they still had lived this great and wonderful life. Well, they eat from the fruit of the tree, and now they know things. One of the things they find out, they know that they've done wrong. They know that they're naked, and so they try and hide themselves, and that's how God figures out that, hey, y'all, you've done something wrong here. But that's also why when we get to the end of the story, they're kicked out of the garden, not because they are being punished, but because now they know things. They can't go back anymore to that place. They can't go back to that place, that idyllic place anymore, because they've been changed. They're different now. And all the benefits and consequences that come with it, now they've got to deal with. So we go on from there. We go on to the story of Noah. And Noah's story takes place, and it's kind of, hard for us to kind of conceive of the details of how all this would work, but think about it this way. Have you all ever sent one of your kids or been that kid that was sent into timeout or sent back to your room? I've seen some looks up around here of parents parents looking at their kids going, yeah, it was just this morning when they didn't want to get out of bed. You send them off there. I was never that kid that was sent to my room growing up. Just don't ask my parents. Of course, they would send me to my room growing up, and I'd be like, that's where all my books are. This works for me. Okay, well, 30 minutes of uninterrupted reading time, I'm good with that. But it's kind of, if you're that kid, though, that's out there by yourself, you've been sent off by yourself, it is a lonely place. You're watching everything else go on around you. It feels sometimes like it's been 40 days and 40 nights before you get to go back up, because your whole world is made up of that one little area that you're in, and then you come back out of that, and things have changed, and they're different. Maybe your friends have moved on to a different game, maybe something has happened, and things are different, and now you've got to find your place inside of that world again. And so that's where they find themselves. That's where Noah and his family find themselves. They've been uprooted and they've been sent off adrift for all of that huge long time. And then they come back in, and now they've got to find a new place in this world and figure out how do they go forward from there. But this is where we begin to see that God is doing something different through all of this story. That something new is taking place, because then this happens. God sends that rainbow and says, you know what, I'm not going to do that again, because I don't really like that. That didn't work out as like I really wanted it to. And so I'm going to make this promise with you. And this is going to be the sign of that. Whenever you see my bow in the clouds, this is going to be the sign of my promise that we're going to do things differently. And not just that, but you are going to do things differently from here going forward, because that's how this is going to work. Because I don't want to do this again. We are not going to do this again. It's going to be different. And we see this first promise that God made, this first covenant that is made between God and us, and saying that we're going to be different. And then the story goes on. And we're still struggling with this, but we know we've got kind of a new lease on life. And we get to that point where we get to the story of the Tower of Babel. And the tower is built because all the people think, hey, we know how things work. We're good at this. We know all that there is to know. We can build a tower that reaches all the way up to God, and we can do that thing. And then God says, I don't think so, y'all. And destroys the tower and confuses all their languages. Well, how many of you know this guy? How many of you know or have been that teenager that thought they knew everything? Don't talk to my parents, because, I did know everything when I was in high school, no matter what they said. I was that guy, thought, I know everything, I know how all this goes. And how many of you have ever wanted to look at that teenager or that person and say, oh, you poor child? Just wait, the real world's about ready to come up and smack you on the backside of the head, and then you're going to see what happens here. That's the story of the Tower of Babel. It's not that it's punishment that God is saying, I'm going to confuse your language. He's saying, all right, you're ready to take that next step. You think you know this. Well, the real world's a little bit different than you expected, and so go forth and explore that world. And then they're stuck trying to figure out, oh wait, this ain't the way we think things work. It's different, it's harder. We've got to work through this, but we come then after that to the next part of the story, where in fact we spend most of Genesis, and it's that story of Abraham, where Abraham knows and he understands that he doesn't know everything. We've moved beyond those teenage years where we're know-it-alls and we think we've got it all figured out. And we know that we can't do it all on our own. We don't know everything we need to know. We don't have all that figured out, but we still go forward because we know we've got to find folks that we can put our faith in and that we can trust. And that's when God calls to Abraham and says, Abraham, go on out. I want you to go down to this promised land, and here I'm going to make this promise to you. I don't care how old you are, Abraham. I'm going to make this promise and say that you are going to be the father of a great nation. And Abraham says, okay. He gets up and he moves his entire family according to the promise that God made, and he does it because he puts his faith and his trust in God, and Abraham knows that he doesn't know everything, but he knows who to follow, and that's what he's doing. And he lives out that promise, and that promise then is reiterated to Abraham multiple times, and then through every generation after that, that promise gets remade and reiterated to that generation that God is there. That there is hope beyond where they are, that we can put our faith and trust in Him. As we go through, this is the place where we begin to remember and to see that the story story doesn't end. There's always more pictures. Those are the books I like to read, picture books. There are always more pages left of the story that are still to come, because that story is still being told. And we're going to talk about more pieces of that story as we go through the coming weeks. But for us, the important part is remember that God is still telling that story. And we still have a place in it. We're going to read stories about folks who are dealing with the same things we deal with, who carry our same confidences and strengths that we have, but also carry our weaknesses and our concerns. And we're going to see that that long arc of Scripture holds that God is faithful and that God loves us. Because ultimately we get to that point where God takes that next bigger step and sends His Son into the world as a direct intervention and says, y'all are ready to take that next step, but I know you can't do it on your own. Here, let me send someone to come and help you do that. Because I know you can't do it on your own, but you are my people. I have made that promise to you, and you are ready for the next chapter in this story that we're telling. Here's the thing as we go forward. Our challenge is to live out the story for what's being said. From the very beginning, God speaks into creation and never stops telling it. It's that story that we can hold on to no matter what we face. It's that story we can share with others no matter what they face. It's that story that has the power to change the world even today. So go this week, tell the story. Don't try to tell your story or my story or your truth or my truth, but try and tell God's story. Let that become your story. And let that story be told through all your actions and all that you are. And let us go and do this in Christ's name.